Hello, my name is Geier of Minilux in Vienna and co-founder of Wetzlar Camera Auctions. We're here today with Felix Hoffmann in Photo Arsenal. Welcome to this new video. Today we are here with Felix Hoffmann in Photo Arsenal in Wien, and we are speaking about the work of Henri Cartier-Bresson and his cameras. Not just one, but a few. So thank you very much for having us. We have seen the exhibition. We have just had a few hours here of seeing stuff we've never seen before, which I personally like a lot. And we've prepared a few questions in advance for you. And if you're ready.
Yes, a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. So when you first saw all the material of the photographs, which was the most surprising thing or photo you've seen, or a background story that really stayed with you?
So the Henri Cartier-Bresson work or oeuvre is stored in a foundation in Paris. So he gave his legacy in this kind of boxes which are in the Marais. And I visited the whole foundation together with the curator Ulrich Pohlmann. He was the former director of the Photo Museum in Munich, and we are longtime friends. So we went to Paris. Ulrich is much more into this topic of Henri Cartier-Bresson and his work. And then you realize, okay, there is much more material than you have in mind. So there are a few pictures what you always carry with you when you are an art or photo historian. But then you open the boxes and you realize, oh, what is this for a surprise? And then you have the amount of material, a few thousand, 10,000, 20,000 pictures. And then you think, okay, how to prepare a proper exhibition and how to reduce the amount of pictures to something what we have now here on the walls.
You mentioned that not only beautiful, but also a bit of a stressing task.
Of course, it's a painful process because you have to kill your darlings. That's sometimes very, it's a very special moment when you have to say, okay, we have a series and then we have to reduce from 50 pictures to 10.
So this also already answers basically the second question, which is the main concept actually of this actual exhibition.
Yeah, the main concept was to bring to Vienna really pictures which were not so often seen, and to really reduce thoughts of Henri Cartier-Bresson where you have a little bit of surprise in. So where I was a little bit surprised that Ulrich suggested us series where you think, segregation in the US-American continent in the 60s and 70s. That was a surprise for me because I have known the book Henri Cartier-Bresson in America, but then to really think what was his view on the segregation of black and white people in this country was a surprise that we brought out in this exhibition.
So it's good to see a mix then basically from his whole career, life also, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah, but starting already 1930s until the mid-1970s, I would say. And you can also see a few images here with him and his cameras used, which is always nice because he started in 1932 with getting his first Leica actually in hands, which I've seen in documentaries and images online, and browsing through his cameras, that it used to be a Leica I in a silver chrome finish, which is pretty known, but this camera was a black camera. And I will come to that back later, why it's black and not chrome, but the Leica I in 1931 was always a black camera, and it was only in 1932 and 33 fashionable to get a silver chrome camera or accessories or I don't know, belts or buckles or whatever. And before that it was black. It was very low profile. We couldn't recognize it, and then it got more flashy, let's say. So, and this camera is I like a one end chrome finish. So this was made afterwards actually. So I don't know if he decided to get it chromed or not, but it was black before. And then in 1932 the rangefinder it got into the Leica in the Leica II, and then you could focus properly without an attachment on the camera. And I've seen an image of him, which is unfortunately not here, with a Leica II, but this is not mentioned somewhere. But we have an image already of him in 1946, which shows another chrome Leica 3C. So he constantly upgraded his gear. And then obviously later, in the 1950s, he got something different, which we will come into later. So which of his photographs do you think best shows his philosophy of photography? And I have another an opinion to that as well.
So there are some, of course, which are quite well known. So we have the person jumping over a wet surface, just touching with, or before touching with the foot, the wet surface of a street in this jump process. So one moment later, the whole composition of this picture would be destroyed. And the interesting thing is that he always brought his idea of the decisive moment together with this picture. I'm a little bit stepping away from this idea of the decisive moment. When you see films, how Henri Cartier-Bresson photographed, he had several Leica cameras, sometimes around his neck, so that he's not losing the end of a film to take the next picture. So I'm a little bit, when you see the contact sheets, it's not only taking the picture of a decisive moment, I think it's as well an edition process. So that is always what we have to in mind. It's a selection process, how to select pictures. That is one picture which I think is very important. One picture I think, and I really admire, is one I have here in the book. And it's a person he photographed in Spain, where you really see a beautiful composition. So you have a man in a door, there's a window cut in the door, you have it painted here, you have a back area, and you have this fascinating moment where one glass of his glasses are mirroring, and it looks really like a collage. That is the interesting process here in this picture, and it's a beautiful composition, a very rare moment where you have several areas in one picture, and you really see how he was connected to the art scene in especially the 1930s of the surrealism, but other areas where he very much interacted with. So he was not only a photographer, he was as well very much into the art and photo world, and a really good thinker. What is art, what is photography, and reflecting both areas.
Especially in his early
years, these pictures are outstanding in terms of confusion. I'm standing in front of this picture and sometimes I still don't know what is on. And I've seen them so often, regularly, and still asking myself, what can I see in this picture?
So it's not always just a split second, no, like in the 50s and 60s.
Exactly.
It's much more composing the image. But
exactly. And he's carrying something with him. So he was trained with something we have or he already has known or recognized in the art history.
Or planned.
Yeah.
Maybe in advance already.
Exactly.
In his hand, in his mind. Right. Now that's an interesting insight, basically. What I like is that he focused later on in the 50s and 60s much more on the ordinary or regular people. You know, it's showing the normal life or a simple life and the real life for me.
Exactly, because he was socialist, so he was very much into the world of the Norman people. And we sometimes forget that in the 1930s, the topic of vacation, holiday, was not existing before. So he was doing a series on the first time people having holiday, going for a picnic, because they were not allowed to have holidays. They were only workers. And he was, especially during the 1930s, very much into that idea that there is poorness growing, that we have problems in our society, and on the other hand, the politicians are developing new structures. And that's very fascinating for me, especially when you see what he took for pictures during the Second World War in the 1940s. These are still touching moments.
I've never seen them before, as we spoke before. Huh? Well, for the Leica or for the lights company, the travel aspect was a huge push for the company. 1930s, 1940s. There were special advertisings to travel with the Leica. It's compact, it's portable. You could put it in the pocket or in a several pockets or several pockets in this case. Yeah. So you stepped away from those big old glass plate machines, and then it became also fashionable in the 1930s because it was also advertised as a camera for ladies because they could put it in the hand and so on. So and even for travels to Africa and stuff like this. It's pretty amazing what traveling helped that company to go into the world. They had subsidiaries in Buenos Aires and Tokyo and wherever in the world. So this was a driving factor.
Exactly. And one good example is the funeral of Mahatma Gandhi. So Henri Cartier-Bresson was hired for Life magazine to go there.
Yeah.
There was only one other photographer taking pictures of this funeral situation. Very important for India, but the other films were destroyed by an accident. So the only existing pictures were taken by Henri Cartier-Bresson. So, and these pictures were published worldwide. So he earned so much money. You can imagine during that time, Life magazine was so important as a reading and leading magazine in the world. And Leica was always with him. You see him physically dancing around in this situation. And sometimes he was very shy, standing in a corner to be invisible. So there are these two kinds of Henri Cartier-Bressons existing, sometimes where he's away and sometimes where he's very active.
But I've seen footage of him where he's really moving extremely smoothly around paper.
Exactly.
1950s, 1960s documentary, which I've seen, and maybe because he got that money, he could also invest in new stuff in Leica, for example, because in regards to invisibility, there is also an interesting aspect for the next camera he got, which was a Leica M3 in 1954, where also an image of him having this camera in hands is here, which was a crop camera before. And then there are some rumors or words spread that he painted his camera himself in black finish. Black paint was then a huge thing for press photographers all over the world, for Leica photographers. especially because they were given only to press photographers. They weren't sold to the public. So these were less reflecting the light, especially. And then he got one lens, one of 5 lenses made, and one for him in black paint, which was never produced again in a black paint finish, which he then had converted to like a screw mount from like a M mount from the M3. And then in 1956 there is one camera which is attributed to him because it was delivered to Tiranti in Paris, to the agency to the Leica importer, which was a Leica IIIg, which was produced from 1956 onwards, and then he had this lens converted to use it on that camera. Always 50 millimeter, if you know. He used 50 millimeter, than most, I would say. But there are images which cannot be taken with a 50 millimeter. Maybe even in this exhibition. There was also a 35 millimeter, which is attributed to him, which he also had converted to like a screw mount for use on that other camera. And then he could use this lens with an adapter on a later M6, which was in the 80s, 84, 85. And you can see it's still this lens, but converted. But very interestingly, he taped then the Leica M6, he taped the red logo, so he liked to be invisible. He even had a Leica Minilux later on, which is a compact autofocus camera, also in black, which is today quite rare. But anyway, he stayed then with black. Started with chrome, and then I mentioned before this Leica I, which was black, but he had converted to chrome because it was more fashionable maybe, but then he went back again to black. So this goes through the history of camera production also, but also press photographers, the evolution in Leica, and for press photographers all over the world having the need to be invisible in certain areas or scenarios, especially. Yeah?
Of course. And he was one of the most brilliant portrait photographers. And I think there is another aspect of the Leica, very important. Leica is very silent, yes. Yeah, and that aspect of no noise, when you are in contact with a person, when you don't know, when the other person doesn't know when the picture is taken, or if there are several pictures taken, that is, I think, a very positive aspect of this camera, especially during that time.
Maybe even the most. And it was a reliable product, yeah, obviously. But interestingly enough, he was a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
In 1940 to 1943, when he escaped.
Yeah.
But he still shot a German Leica. You could think that he would pass everything German from then on, but he still stayed with this German product, obviously. So apart from his photography life and Leica life, what do we know personally about
Henri Cartier-Bresson? There are a lot of myths about him. I have always the feeling he was very active, traveling a lot around the world to collect the pictures, especially in the 1960s and 70s. He was very active. So we have series taken in the US, in India, in China, in Russia. So, you know, he was, during the time, traveling was not like we can now travel, taking a plane, being there in a few hours. So it was, I think, much more taking energy. And it was much more complicated. And I think he was, on one hand, not very happy when someone took pictures of him. So he was a shy person. On the other hand, he has known exactly how to engage people in front of the camera. So there are these two kind of worlds with him. And then, you know, in the 1990s, late 80s, he started more and more drawing. So in his very early life, he was friend with all the artists especially in the surrealist field. And then he became closer friend with Henri Matisse, Giacometti, and other artists, deeply friend. And he started drawing. And when you see that his life is not only about photography, that it's as well about drawing, art, thinking about art, that is something very interesting, especially when you think about his technical aspect, that he thinks that his pencil is in a way the same as a camera. So he's describing this drawing process as well as a momentum with the camera, using a camera instead of a pencil. So there are so many interactions telling us stories about this person.
He said the camera is the extension of the eye, but yeah, capturing the moment live, but a drawing, but in the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is very special, I think. You know, there are so rare people. So he was born in 1908 and then dying quite old as an old man. So there is not someone comparable in the 20th century having so much published pictures in magazines and books and dominating the entire century. That is something very special, you know, born so early in the century, dying in the next century, establishing Magnum in 1947 as a cooperative. So he was not the owner of Magnum, but he was one of the founders. So there are so many stories, so many layers in his life.
But he also helped photography, you know, to get photography also into the hands of, of course, professional or ambitious amateurs also. Yeah, he got cameras into the hands of a new generation. Yeah, basically in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Yeah, and this helped grow the whole industry, obviously, but also made reportage photography, war photography, or everything basically spread into the world, and known to everybody. So
yeah, and he established over Magnum the idea of copyright. So before 1947, there was not the right of the own image as a photographer. That is something what we cannot imagine today anymore. And over Magnum, he established the copyright so that we know who is behind a picture. Sometimes we forget that this was not existing before and in the Second World War. And he was the key figures to establish not only the copyright, as well the whole technical aspects behind.
very interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, that's an interesting fact. Thank you very much for answering our questions.
My big pleasure.
Thank you very much again for having us here. Please visit the exhibition, which is
Up until September 22.
September 22nd. We hope we will bring this out now as soon as possible, so you have plenty of time to still visit this beautiful exhibition. Check the description below for the links to everything and for future exhibitions. And please, if you have any questions regarding Henri Cartier-Bresson, please reach out. If you have any questions regarding any special cameras he had, or any editions or something like that, we're always happy to help, and sometimes have beautiful cameras in the style of Henri Cartier-Bresson. Even had some pretty special cameras of other photographers as well, which have passed our hands. So that's always extremely interesting to have and see and feel and touch and experience everything, not just the gear, but also the result of the gear, which is often forgotten in the camera collecting world, unfortunately, but it comes together and stays together and has to stay together.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting aspect. Never forget. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
We're happy that we've done this, and we hope to see each other again.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Very much, and stay healthy. Bye bye.